What are some tips to reduce insulin resistance? Hi, I'm Dr. Eric Westman and welcome to my channel where I review and debunk nutritional misinformation online. In this video we're going to hear some advice about how to address insulin resistance. And of course you always want to consider the source, and it seems like a good, reasonable source of information. But now in this video it's a good lesson to ask the question, compared to what? So here's some tips that may help you or may not be strong enough for you, depending on what you're trying to accomplish. Be sure to listen to the end where I give my final thoughts.
In this video, you'll learn 8 insulin resistance diet tips to lower insulin fast. The key to lowering insulin resistance is to live a low insulin and inflammation lifestyle.
Totally agree. So that all of us who are trying to help you with lifestyle advice, whether it be carnivore or herbivore, plant-based or animal-based or omnivore, if we're trying to lower that insulin level. So the insulin level is what causes insulin resistance, or by lowering the insulin level, you can fix insulin resistance. That may not exactly be the same thing, but we can fix insulin resistance by lowering the insulin level. And the insulin in the blood is raised in a regard or as a function of the amount of carbohydrate in the diet. So carbohydrate goes in, it could be starches, which get digested to sugars, which then raise the glucose. And then because the body doesn't like the glucose to be too elevated, it ushers out insulin, sends out insulin to usher glucose into the cells, and then the blood glucose goes down. So anything that would lower carbohydrate in the diet will lower the glucose and insulin, and will be in the tips here, I'm sure of it. Let's see.
A big part of your lifestyle is your diet, including what you eat and when you eat. If you don't follow these tips today, you're increasing your risk for diseases like type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, obesity, and dementia. Tip number 1 is to drink at least half of your body weight in ounces of water per day.
Oh, right. Water doesn't raise the blood sugar, doesn't raise the insulin. I hadn't thought of that one. Interesting. I think in terms of foods that raise the blood sugar, and water wouldn't do that.
Tip number 2 is to eat at least 30 to 40 grams of protein at each meal. For adults, 30 grams is the minimum amount necessary to help stimulate your muscles to grow and repair. Having a large amount of protein with your meals will also keep you full from one meal to the next and reduce your tendency to snack, which will further help lower insulin resistance.
So protein doesn't raise the blood glucose much. And I think the amount is going to depend on the context. Whether you need 3 meals a day or not is another entire different matter, but she implied you did. But focusing on protein as the dietary source of nutrition, great tip.
Foods that are high in protein include chicken, steak, eggs, salmon, and other seafood, edamame or other soy products like tofu, dairy products like cottage cheese, and low-sugar, full-fat Greek yogurt. Now, other plant-based protein options exist that can be higher in starches, which aren't as good for lowering insulin. Beans and lentils and pasta made from them.
That was quinoa versus salmon. I remember a patient of mine some years ago saying his cardiologist asked him to eat more quinoa. And he didn't know what it was, and he basically said, "What's a quinoa?" And so, you have to be sensitive to where people are, what they identify as foods they like and can eat, and that quinoa is just way too high in carbs to recommend for lowering insulin and insulin resistance. Beans and lentils are probably the starchiest foods. Include rice in there. If an apple about a fist size has 20 grams of carbs, rice, beans, lentils, that has 40 grams of carbs. But her little hedge there was in moderation. Well, what I tell people is you'd have to have a very small amount because it will still raise the blood sugar. You can check this out by checking your continuous glucose monitor response after eating beans and lentils. In fact, let me know down below if you tried that out. But I would just say don't have those and do the kind of politically incorrect thing of just saying don't have those instead of, well, you can have them, but you can have much. I want to thank our friends at Element for sponsoring today's video. Element has a great mixture of sodium, potassium, and magnesium, everything you need on a keto diet. But specifically, this raw, unflavored version, which is labeled with a blue, teal-colored banner. This teal-colored, raw, unflavored version does not contain stevia, sugar, or any additives except a science-backed mix of 3 electrolytes our bodies need in quantities that have been already measured out for you. This is great for a keto diet, but most important thing is that it tastes great. As you know, electrolytes are really important, especially if you're following a keto or a carnivore diet. Get a free 8-count sample pack of Element's most popular drink mix flavors with any purchase. That's a great way to try it out and to share Element with a friend. Get yours at drinklmnt.com/Eric Westman. This offer is only available at my link, drinklmnt.com/Eric Westman. You'll find that in the description below. Thank you, Element, for sponsoring this video. I'd like to give a big thank you to our friend.
Tip number 3 is to eat at least 25 grams of whole food fiber a day for women or 35 for men. Fiber is important for many reasons to help lower insulin resistance. It helps slow the glucose and insulin response following a meal, helps you feel full and less likely to go back for seconds, helps support healthy gut bacteria, and can help lower inflammation.
So if you were going to eat a carb-filled diet, in my book I have 3 different levels of carbs. It's not all keto or super low in carbs. But you wouldn't have fiber if you were doing a super low carb or keto diet. So here again, context is so important, and you wouldn't recommend fiber if someone's doing a keto diet, but you could if someone was following a higher carb diet. But then, did you hear it slows the glucose response after a meal? I was taught that it was normal to have a glucose response after a meal. Glucose goes up, insulin goes up. Well, normal is now associated with insulin resistance and heart disease. And the heart doctors are trying to figure out how to lower that rise in glucose and insulin after the meal with medications, or you could just reduce the carbs in the meal. So again, the context matters, and you don't need fiber to lower your blood glucose elevation if you're not eating foods that raise the blood glucose.
There are many low-carb, high-fiber foods, including avocado, blackberries, raspberries, non-starchy vegetables, chia and basil seeds, and nuts.
So when she says it helps to keep insulin low, compared to a typical American diet, of course, sure, all of these will.
When you're properly hydrating and eating more protein and fiber, you'll naturally have fewer sugar cravings.
Well, if you're not eating sugar, you won't crave sugar. It's interesting how just saying the reality of that can't be said. If you were eating meat and broccoli, you're not going to be craving sugar. So of course it reduces sugar cravings.
Tip number 4 is to reduce added sugars. Currently, the American Heart Association recommends no more than about 24 grams of added sugar per day for women and 36 for men. The less, the better. And this adds up very fast if you're eating processed foods, even the healthier options. Obvious sources of added sugar include pop or soda, candy, cakes, cookies, pies, flavored coffee drinks, etc. Not so obvious sources of added sugar include coffee creamers, granola bars, yogurts, and many frozen foods. For example, this healthy choice sweet and sour chicken has 21 grams of added sugar. Start looking at your nutrition panel at the added sugars line. Note that depending on the product, some natural sweeteners like honey, agave, or fruit juice may not be included in this added sugar line because they are considered natural. So the real amount may be higher based on the ingredients.
If you're going to look at the label, I recommend that you look at total carbohydrate, not added sugars. And that's just from the standpoint of knowing the biology that often these things are digested to sugar, even though it doesn't say added sugar on. And I have to think this was kind of a political compromise, that how do we get people to reduce sugar, but we don't tell companies that sugar is bad. And so the powers that be, focused on added sugar, when it's really not a low enough or a reduction in the sugar total consumption, because starches get digested to sugar, to make a meaningful difference for most people. So that's why I look at total carbs, or in this label it will be total carb, 23 grams. And of course you look up at the top to make sure you look at the serving size. That's just 2 tablespoons of it. So if you had if you had the whole container, whatever this product is, that would be 22 times 24. So we're talking a lot of carbs in this product.
You'll see this agave food label doesn't have any added sugar line, even though it's all sugar.
Oh, that agave, right? So people will come in, so I can't have sugar. Can I have honey? No, that's full of sugar. Can I have agave? I said, no, that's still a lot of sugar. So the scientific way to evaluate these products is to look at the total carbs on the label.
To get a sense of all of the sugar in the food, look at the total sugars line and the ingredients.
So I don't agree with that. I mean, I think you can have a better evaluation of a product by looking at the total carbohydrate, not just the total sugars. And that's because these carbohydrates, the starches, are digested to sugar in our stomachs.
Tip number 5 is to reduce refined starches. We've already talked about refined sugars in the form of added sugar. But to lower insulin resistance, it's important to reduce your total starches in your diet too. That's because these refined starches and sugars spike your blood sugar and insulin. Think of things made with white flour or potatoes, such as chips, bread, pasta, bagels, pretzels, English muffins, cookies, cake, etc. Whole wheat is better than white, but still contains a lot of starch, so will still cause a significant blood sugar and insulin response.
Yeah, just even beware of things that are called keto bread today. So in the keto world, you can look at net carbs on the front. It might even say 0 net carbs, but you look at the total carbs on the label and it says 15 total carbs. I mean, you might as well have a regular slice of bread for that. But I prefer that you look at total carbs. It brings together the sugars and the starches into one number to go by. It's just a little simpler.
Tip number 6 is to reduce artificial sweeteners and food additives that still raise blood glucose. Look for the following ingredients on your food labels. If they have them, throw them out or really reduce your portions. Sucralose, acesulfame potassium, aspartame, saccharin, and maltodextrin.
So I just don't know where this comes from. I think perhaps the idea that you have to have clean eating and nothing can be unnatural, and I think the moderate use of these non-sugar sweeteners have helped a lot of people get off sugar and to be able to have sweet things without raising the blood sugar. And remember, that's what we're trying to defend against. Raising the blood sugar raises the insulin. It's the elevated insulin that causes insulin resistance. That's the mechanism I'd like you to remember. But these things don't raise the blood glucose. And in this way of thinking of the pathophysiology or how the problem occurs, it has no relationship to raising the blood glucose.
Aspartame is hiding in a lot of low-sugar gums. The first 4 ingredients I mentioned are artificial sweeteners, and while they may not acutely raise blood glucose in many, they have been shown to impair your gut health, which will harm your ability to regulate blood sugars in the long run.
Yeah, so I don't agree. And in what was the language? It doesn't raise blood glucose in many. No, it doesn't raise it in anybody. It's very interesting language that is hedging toward, it doesn't cause harm. It doesn't raise blood glucose, and that's the harm we're trying to mitigate against. And the kind of fear mongering. In fact, watching this, I wonder, well, what do I eat, right? If there's so many things to watch out for.
0-calorie drinks that are sweet will also make your brain think that calories are coming in. This will result in an insulin response that leads to a drop in blood sugar, which will make you hungry.
Yeah, I've yet to see that in a scientific study developed in a methodology of someone who's not eating carbs, drinking a soda like that to see if there's an insulin spike or a rise. The studies that have come out in humans have nothing to do with low-carb diets, so they're looking at it in the context of other foods, or animal studies where the change in insulin, it's very difficult to know if it's significant to people. So let me know if there's credible information about non-sugar sweetener raising insulin level. Haven't seen it.
Tip number 7 is to eat plenty of healthy fats. Fat has the lowest insulin response of all the macronutrients. Protein is next, and starches and sugars have the highest. Fat, fiber, and protein help you feel full between meals and less likely to snack. Foods that are high in healthy fat and low in carbs include avocado, avocado oil, olives, olive oil, nuts and seed butters, fatty fish like salmon, herring, mackerel, trout, sardines, tuna, and halibut, cheese, full-fat cottage cheese, full-fat Greek yogurt, full-fat milk, hard-boiled eggs, and heavy cream. Again, more foods are in our Ultimate Food Guide linked in the description. A quick note is that you'll want to avoid inflammatory fats found in processed seed oils like canola, corn, cottonseed, soy, sunflower, safflower, grapeseed, and rice bran. Start screening your foods for these oils along with the 5 artificial sweeteners mentioned earlier, and look for healthier fat alternatives like olive oil, avocado oil, ghee, or butter.
Well, that's quite a list, and it seemed pretty reasonable actually. It didn't have a lot of carbs. Those are very familiar to you if you're eating a diet that I've recommended to you in the clinic. It's going to be very close, but I don't fearmonger about the non-sugar sweeteners or worry too much about the oils and seed oils because you're not having much of them. So I'm afraid this has got an element of the fear about the micro carbs and this and that and the other thing, and I know that drives clicks. People, it actually keeps people engaged because you're making them afraid, when I'm trying to relieve worry and make you less afraid of things that you eat. But you want to mitigate that insulin rise for sure. And part of the old paradigm, did you hear it coming through, where having this kind of protein will keep you going for the next? How many of you have experienced just the hunger being gone? I mean, or normalized, where you're not hungry 3 times a day and you don't need to eat something that carries you over. Although I hear that language in some of my patients, even when they're fully keto adapted. But the idea that you need to eat 3 meals a day with snacks and you're hungry all day long, for the most part, that's gone in just a few days on a low-carb keto diet.
Tip number 8 is to use intermittent fasting. This is where you deliberately don't eat for a certain amount of time for health or weight loss reasons. A great starting point for most people is 12 hours a day of fasting. For example, you could stop eating at 7 p.m. and start eating at 7 a.m. A daily 12 to 14-hour fast is a great habit to implement to lower insulin resistance.
Well, wait a minute. Don't you do that? Isn't that kind of normal? To not eat after dinner and then you wake up and have breakfast? To me, that's not a fast. That's just normal living. So the problem with introducing the idea of fasting, in my experience, without controlling carbs, is that people are hungry. And it's very difficult to not have food if you're hungry. So I don't teach intermittent fasting. I teach keep the carbs super low, the insulin will come down and your hunger goes away. And if you eat less, and call it 1 meal a day or 2 meals a day, intermittent fasting, 18-6 or whatever interval, great. But it really means you're just not eating unless you're hungry.
Depending on your degree of insulin resistance, it may require longer fasts, at least occasionally, to further lower insulin. But 12 to 14 hours a day is a great baseline fasting schedule for most people.
Well, I think this is kind of an interesting and good introductory video into what insulin resistance is, which is elevated insulin levels, and you want to eat to get that insulin level down. I might quibble a bit on which foods, again, context matters. If you're following a low carb or low glycemic or keto diet, you're going to want to be careful about those different kinds of foods, including the fiber is not necessary if you're super low in carbs. If you're going to be eating vegetable sources of protein, you do have to be careful about the carbs if you're doing a keto level diet with vegetables or vegetarian approach. So In general, I think it's a good video with a little shading there, depending on what kind of diet you're following. If you like this, please like, subscribe, ring the notification bell, and look for new content on Wednesdays and Fridays. If you enjoyed this video, consider joining our YouTube membership for early access and exclusive live Q&As with me. Just click the Join button below or support us with a PayPal in the description.